It was late at night when I missed the last train. I had been at a friend's place and lost track of time, and now I was standing alone on the platform. The station was almost empty, just the flickering lights and the sound of a distant train echoing in the tunnels. I decided to take the next train back, even though the schedule said there wasn't one at this hour. The platform was quiet, too quiet. I noticed an older train roll in, lights dim, doors opening slowly. A few people got on, but I didn't recognize any of them. Something felt off. I took a seat near the middle of the carriage. The doors closed and the train started moving, but the scenery outside didn't look familiar. Usually, I would see the usual stations passing by, but everything looked different. The lights outside were strange, and there were no signs or names I could recognize. After a few minutes, I tried to ask a fellow passenger where we were, but when I turned, the carriage was empty. I blinked, thinking I was imagining it, but the emptiness didn't change. My phone had no signal, and even the time seemed frozen. I pressed the call button for the conductor. Nothing happened. Then, faintly, I heard an announcement over the speaker. A name I didn't recognize. It sounded like it was whispering directly to me. Kisaragi Station. My heart started pounding. I had never heard of it before. The train slowed and stopped at a station that didn't appear on any map. The doors opened and a cold draft came in. I stepped onto the platform. It looked normal at first, but the lights flickered in a way that made shadows stretch across the walls. There was no one else there. No sounds of trains arriving or leaving. Nothing but silence. I walked down the platform, hoping to find a sign or someone who could tell me where I was. The further I went, the more I felt like I shouldn't be there. The exit stairs seemed to loop back into the station. Every turn I took brought me back to the same empty platform. Then I noticed something moving at the far end. A figure in a dark uniform standing perfectly still. I called out, but it didn't respond. I started walking toward it, and as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving naturally. It was like it was floating slightly above the ground. I froze. The lights flickered once more, and when they stabilized, the figure was gone. The platform stretched on endlessly, and the usual sounds of a station, announcements, trains, people, were completely gone. I tried to retrace my steps to the train, but it had disappeared. Hours may have passed. Minutes, I don't know. Eventually, I saw another train approaching. Its lights were dim, but I jumped on without hesitation. The doors closed, and the train started moving. This time, the scenery outside looked familiar again. I recognized the stations as I passed them. When I finally got off at my regular stop, I ran home without looking back. My phone worked again, and the time was exactly what it should have been. I told a few friends, but they laughed it off, saying I probably fell asleep and dreamed the rest. I know what I experienced wasn't a dream. I can't explain it, and I don't want to go near that train line at night again. Something about Kisaragi Station isn't normal. I'm not sure if anyone else has returned from it the same way I did. I just know that if you ever see a train arriving when it shouldn't, you might want to think twice before getting on. I grew up in a small, remote village in the mountains of northern Japan. The winters there were not like other places. The snow fell so thick and fast, it could bury a house in a single night. The wind sounded like a crying woman. The elders always told us stories to keep us inside after dark. The most famous story was the Yuki-Onna, the snow woman. She was a spirit, they said, a ghost of the blizzard. She appeared as a beautiful woman with skin as pale as ice and long black hair. She wore a thin white kimono, but the cold did not touch her. She would drift through the storm, her feet never touching the snow. If she found you alone in the mountains, she would freeze you solid with her icy breath, or sometimes she would lead you deep into the wilderness until you were lost forever. We were told to never ever speak of her outside. To say her name was to invite her attention. I thought these were just silly tales for children. I stopped believing them when I turned 16. That was my mistake. It happened during my last winter in the village. I was 18. A fierce blizzard had closed the only road out. My parents were in the next town, stranded by the weather. I was alone in our old wooden house. The electricity had died hours before. I was huddled by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets. The fire was my only source of light and heat. Outside, the world was a wall of howling white. I heard a knock on the door. It was a soft, gentle sound. Too soft for such a violent storm. My blood went cold. No one could be out there. It was impossible. The knock came again. I stood up, my heart pounding. I walked to the door. "Who is there?" I shouted. No answer came, only the wind. I slowly slid the wooden door open, just a crack. The cold that rushed in was unnatural. It stole the breath from my lungs. Standing in the snow was a woman. She was the most beautiful person I had ever seen. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was the sound of ice cracking on a frozen lake. "May I come in? I am so cold." Every childhood warning screamed in my head, but she looked so real, so human, and she was shivering. I could not leave a person to freeze. My logic fought my fear. I opened the door wider. "Thank you," she said, and glided inside. She moved past me without a sound. She stood before my fireplace, but she did not hold her hands out to the flames. She just stared into them. The firelight seemed to make her skin glow. The room grew colder, not warmer. I could see my own breath clouding in the air. "I'm lost," she said, not turning to look at me. "The storm separated me from my family." "Where are you from?" I asked. My voice was a nervous tremor. She pointed a slender pale finger towards the window, into the heart of the mountain. From there, no one lived up there. The mountain was sheer rock and deep forest, a place for animals and spirits. The knot in my stomach tightened. I looked at the floor where she stood. There were no wet footprints, only a small patch of frost. I knew what she was then. The stories were true. I was frozen in place, not by cold, but by pure terror. The Yuki-Onna turned her head and looked directly at me. Her eyes were endless pools of black, like two frozen lakes at midnight. "You are a kind boy," she whispered. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It held no warmth. "You let me in. For that, I will spare your life tonight." I could not speak. I could only stare. "But," she continued, her voice dropping even lower, "you must make me a promise. You will tell no one of my visit. Not your parents, not your friends, no one. If you speak a single word of this, I will know. I will return for you, and I will not be so merciful a second time. Do you understand?" I managed a single sharp nod. She turned and walked back to the door. She did not open it. She simply passed through the solid wood like a mist. She was gone. The room's temperature slowly returned to normal. The fire roared back to life as if it had been suppressed. I stood there, shaking. For a long time, I did not sleep that night. When the storm cleared and my parents returned, I said nothing. I kept my promise. I left the village for university in Tokyo and never moved back. I tried to forget. The noise and the lights of the city helped. For years, I convinced myself it was a dream, a hallucination from the cold and the isolation. Then, last week, my son turned 8. We were visiting my parents in the old village. He was playing with the neighborhood children. I overheard their conversation. They were telling ghost stories. My son, wanting to impress them, said, "My daddy saw the Yuki-Onna once. He let her inside his house." My blood turned to ice. That night, a strange cold settled over the village. It is summer, but a frost is forming on my window. The wind is beginning to sound like a whisper. I am writing this down because I cannot speak it. I have broken my promise. She knows. She is coming, and this time, she will not ask to come inside. This happened when I was in high school. Our school was old. It had long, empty hallways after classes ended. The bathrooms were especially creepy. They were always cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. We had a story about one of them. The boys' bathroom on the second floor. They said a spirit lived there. We called him Manto. It means red cape. The story was simple. If you used the last door, a voice would speak to you from under the door. You would not see anyone. The voice would offer you a choice, red paper or blue paper. If you asked for red paper, you would be slashed. Your blood would stain the walls. If you asked for blue paper, you would be strangled until your face turned blue. The only way to survive was to refuse the choice. You had to say you did not need any paper. We all laughed about it. It was just a silly story, until it happened to me. I stayed late one Tuesday for a club activity. I finished around 7 in the evening. The school was almost empty. I felt a sudden need to use the bathroom before my long train ride home. The closest one was on the second floor. The girls' bathroom was locked for cleaning. A sign hung on the door. I did not want to go all the way down to the first floor. I saw the boys' bathroom. The door was slightly open. The hallway was silent. I decided no one would know. I would be quick. I pushed the door open and went inside. It was colder in there than in the hallway. The air was still. The room was lit by a single, flickering light. I walked to the last stall. I opened the door and went in. I did my business quickly. As I stood up to flush, I felt a cold draft on my ankles. Then I heard a voice. It was smooth and polite, like a gentleman's. It came from the other side of the stall door. "Excuse me," the voice said. "Would you like red paper or blue paper?" My heart stopped. I froze. My hand was still on the flush handle. This was not real. It could not be real. It was a prank. One of the boys from my club was playing a joke. I stayed silent. I hoped they would go away. The voice spoke again. It was closer now, right outside my door. "Miss," it said, a little more firmly, "you must choose, red paper or blue paper." I looked down at the gap under the stall door. I saw no feet, no shadow. I was filled with a pure, cold fear. The stories were true. AKA Manto was here, with me. My mind raced. Red paper meant death by slashing, blue paper meant death by strangulation. I had to refuse. I had to say I did not need any. My throat was tight. It was hard to breathe. I tried to form the words, I don't, I stammered. The voice cut me off. It was no longer polite. It was impatient. It was hungry. "Choose," it demanded. "Red or blue?" Panic took over. I could not think. The two colors flashed in my mind. Red, blue. I blurted out the first thing I thought of. "Yellow. I want yellow paper." There was a complete silence. The cold draft vanished. The flickering light above me steadied. The presence was gone. I waited for a full minute, trembling. I slowly, carefully unlocked the stall door and peeked out. The bathroom was empty. I ran out of that bathroom and down the hallway. I did not stop until I was outside the school gates. I never told anyone what happened. I was too scared. I thought my strange answer had saved me. I was wrong. A week later, I was walking home after dark. The street was quiet. I felt a cold breeze on a warm night. I heard a smooth, familiar voice whisper from the shadows behind me. "Yellow paper," it said. "A most interesting choice." I turned around. There was no one there, but I saw a flash of a yellow cape, the color of sickness, vanishing around the corner. The offers have not stopped. They have changed. Now the voice does not ask for red or blue. It asks for yellow. It follows me. It finds me in shopping mall bathrooms, in restaurant restrooms. It is always there when I am alone. I do not know what happens if I accept the yellow paper, and I am too terrified to find out. My only hope is to never be alone. But I know one day I will be, and it will be there, waiting with its new question.